He wasn't running from his past. He was outgrowing it. There comes a time in every man's life when he realizes no one's coming to save him. No one's going to hand him closure. No one's going to apologize for the pain they caused. And that's the moment. He either breaks or he begins again. This is the story of the man who chose to begin again. He used to lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, not because he couldn't sleep, but because his thoughts were louder than silence. Memories played like old films in his mind. Faces, moments, mistakes. Every failure had a voice. Every regret had a heartbeat. And every night, he'd whisper to himself, "Maybe I deserve this." He didn't realize it then, but those were the nights that were quietly breaking him and slowly rebuilding him into something stronger. People saw a calm man, but inside, he was carrying storms. He laughed with others, but deep down, he was lost, trapped between who he used to be and the man he still hadn't become. He wanted to change. He needed to change, but change doesn't come from wanting. It comes from hurting. He had people once, friends, family, someone who said they'd stay forever. But forever is shorter than it sounds. When his life fell apart, so did their loyalty. The calls stopped, the messages disappeared, and the silence became deafening. At first, it broke him. Then it woke him. Because one day, he realized something powerful. No one's responsible for saving you. No one owes you understanding. No one's obligated to believe in you when you're still learning to believe in yourself. And that realization, though painful, became the seed of his transformation. He started doing the quiet work, the kind no one sees, no one claps for. He woke up early, not to post it online, but to rebuild his discipline. He worked out, not to impress anyone, but to prove to himself he still could. He studied. He journaled. He listened to the silence until it started teaching him things that noise never could. Every day was a battle between his old habits and his new hunger. But little by little, he began to rise. There were mornings when the weight of his past sat heavy on his chest. Days when he wanted to quit, when his reflection reminded him of everything he failed to be. But he didn't stop. He couldn't. Because something inside him whispered, "This pain has a purpose." He stopped explaining himself to people who only understood his past. He stopped apologizing for outgrowing places where his soul no longer fit. He stopped lowering his voice just to be accepted by those who never really listened. He was done begging for peace. He was building it. And with every step forward, his past started fading, not because it vanished, but because it no longer had control. The man who once doubted his worth was now writing his own definition of it. The man who used to chase people was now chasing purpose. The man who once needed validation was now driven by silence, by focus, by the quiet fire only he could feel. He wasn't healed. He wasn't perfect, but he was becoming, and that was enough. You see, when a man finally faces his darkness, when he stops running from his story and starts learning from it, something changes in his eyes. You can see it. The calm, the focus, the strength that doesn't need to be spoken. Because once you've faced the worst version of yourself, no one else can scare you anymore. That's what growth looks like. It's not loud, it's not glamorous, it's silent, it's lonely, it's painful, but it's real. And when you finally outgrow your past, you stop needing to look back, not because you forgot it, but because it no longer defines you. He outgrew his pain. He outgrew his mistakes. He outgrew the need to be understood. And for the first time in his life, he was free. Free from expectations. Free from guilt. Free from the version of himself that everyone else thought he should be. That's what they never tell you about peace. It's expensive. It costs you your comfort. It costs you your history. It costs you the person you once were. But he paid the price, and when he walked away from his past, he didn't just walk away from pain. He walked toward purpose. He walked toward self-respect. He walked toward silence, the kind that's not empty, but earned. Because real power doesn't come from being unbroken. It comes from being broken and still choosing to rise. They say a man changes the moment he gets tired of his own excuses. And that's exactly what happened. One morning, he woke up and realized he was done being the victim in his own story. He was done blaming the world for his pain, done waiting for a miracle that would never come. That morning, he didn't just get out of bed. He rose. He looked around his small room, empty walls, quiet air, and a mirror that reflected both his mistakes and his potential. He stared into his reflection and whispered, "No more. No more wasting time. No more guilt. No more living like he didn't deserve to rebuild his life." That was the day the old version of him started to die, and the man he was meant to become started to breathe. He started small. He didn't chase perfection. He chased consistency. One push-up turned into 10. 10 pages of reading turned into chapters. One honest day of effort became weeks of discipline, and slowly, the man who once doubted himself started believing again. Not because someone told him he could, but because his own actions proved he could. The gym became his therapy, the silence became his teacher, and failure became his motivator. He wasn't chasing applause anymore. He was chasing peace. The kind of peace that only comes from doing what you know you were meant to do. You see, something changes in a man when he gets serious about himself, when he starts waking up early, not because someone told him to, but because he refuses to waste another sunrise. When he starts saying, no, not out of arrogance, but out of self-respect. When he starts valuing his time, his mind, his health like sacred ground. That's when you start to see a different fire in his eyes. A quiet confidence. The kind that doesn't need to speak. Because his discipline does the talking. He stopped explaining his absence. He stopped chasing conversations that didn't serve his growth. He stopped showing up for people who never noticed his silence. Instead, he showed up for himself. He built routines that made him stronger. He made promises to himself, and this time, he kept them. He learned to stay consistent even on days when motivation was gone. And every time his past tried to pull him back, he reminded himself, I'm not that man anymore. It wasn't easy. There were days when his mind screamed for comfort. Days when he felt alone in his journey, misunderstood, unseen, but he kept going, because he wasn't chasing comfort anymore. He was chasing change. You see, every man reaches a point where he has to face himself, his habits, his fears, his pain, and the ones who face it head on, they evolve. They don't just rebuild their life, they reinvent it. That's what he was doing. Every failure that once haunted him became fuel. Every heartbreak that once weakened him became armor. Every disappointment that once broke him became a lesson. He stopped asking, why me? And started asking, what now? And that shift, that single change in mindset, turned his pain into power. He realized that while everyone else was seeking validation, he was quietly building something sacred, self-mastery. He learned to sit with his loneliness without letting it define him. He learned to embrace his flaws without letting them shame him. He learned that real growth isn't about escaping your past. It's about outgrowing it so much that it can no longer reach you. That's when people started noticing. They didn't understand how. They didn't see the nights he spent rebuilding his mind. They didn't see the discipline, the sweat, the prayers whispered into the dark. They just saw the result, the calm, focused, unbothered version of him. And they asked, what changed? He smiled. Because they would never understand that the loudest transformations happen in silence. That the real flex isn't showing the world your progress. It's waking up every day knowing you don't need to prove anything anymore. He had outgrown attention, outgrown validation, outgrown the need to explain his peace to people who lived in chaos. He found strength in stillness. He found clarity in solitude. He found himself, buried beneath years of doubt and noise, and he pulled that man out. He learned that success doesn't always roar. Sometimes, it whispers. It whispers in the quiet decisions no one sees, in the small victories that no one celebrates, in the lonely nights where you choose discipline over distraction. And as his mindset changed, his world followed. Opportunities started finding him. People who once doubted him started noticing. But by then, he didn't care anymore. Because he wasn't chasing recognition, he was chasing peace. He no longer needed to shout, I'm doing better. His presence said it for him. His energy said it for him. His life said it for him. That's what true transformation looks like. When you no longer fight your past, you thank it, because it built the version of you that no one believed existed. He walked differently now, not because he was proud, but because he was free. Free from judgment. Free from shame. free from the desperate need to be understood. He had finally reached that level of peace where silence wasn't loneliness. It was home, and the man who once doubted his worth was now living proof that pain can either destroy you or discipline you. And he chose discipline. Because in the end, that's what growth really is. Not becoming someone new, but remembering who you were before the world told you to forget. He rebuilt himself, quietly, and when his results finally spoke, the world listened. There comes a point in every man's life when he stands in front of the mirror and no longer recognizes the person staring back. But this time, it's not because he's lost. It's because he's evolved. He's no longer the man who begged for attention, validation, or belonging. He's the man who built all of it from within. That's who he became. Not because life gave him peace, but because he learned how to build peace out of chaos. He learned that strength isn't about how loud you roar. It's about how calm you remain when the world tries to break your spirit. He learned that respect doesn't come from demanding it. It comes from embodying it. And when you finally learn to respect yourself, you stop chasing people who never saw your worth in the first place. You see, silence became his greatest weapon. Not because he had nothing to say, but because he had nothing left to prove. Every word that could have been wasted on explaining himself was turned into effort, discipline, and relentless focus. Every hour spent waiting for approval was replaced by hours of becoming someone who didn't need it. He started walking differently, not with arrogance, but with peace. Because he knew now that his story wasn't one of tragedy, it was one of transformation. There's something unshakable about a man who walks away from his past and never looks back. Because it means he's done negotiating with the parts of himself that kept him small. He's done arguing with the world about who he is. He's done trying to fit in rooms that were never built for his destiny. He used to ask, "When will they respect me?" Now he asks, "When will I stop needing them to?" That's growth. That's maturity. That's the quiet kind of power that doesn't need applause to validate its existence. The kind of strength that's forged in solitude, not in spotlight. And when life came back to test him, as it always does, he didn't react. He responded, calmly, with certainty. Because when you've faced your own darkness and survived it, nothing outside of you can scare you anymore. People started noticing. The same ones who once doubted him now whispered his name differently. They couldn't define it, but they felt it. That aura, that discipline, that stillness in his eyes that only comes from walking through hell and not losing your soul. He no longer chased. He attracted. He no longer explained. He demonstrated. He no longer hoped they'd believe. He let his results speak. And here's the truth. That's what every man is capable of becoming. The one who refuses to stay broken. The one who rebuilds his life brick by brick, silently, until one day even life itself bows its head and says, "You won." Because that's what winning looks like. It's not the roar of the crowd. It's not the noise of validation. It's the quiet mornings when you wake up, look around, and realize, you built this. He became unrecognizable to his past self. Not because he faked confidence, but because he grew into it. Not because he forgot his pain, but because he used it as fuel. He didn't try to escape his story, he rewrote it. And in doing so, he taught himself something priceless. That the man you become after the storm is always more dangerous than the one who walked into it. He didn't need revenge. His success was the revenge. His peace was the statement. His silence was the loudest sound in the room. And that's what made him truly powerful. Not his words, but the energy behind them. The way he carried himself when no one was watching. The way he kept promises to himself even when it hurt. The way he stood tall, not because he was invincible, but because he refused to kneel again. So if you're watching this, and you feel like you've lost yourself, listen carefully. The version of you that you're becoming is built in the silence. When nobody claps. When nobody notices. When you're questioning everything. That's where the rebirth happens. Don't rush it. Don't beg for the world to see it. Just build it. In peace, in private, because one day, the same people who couldn't see your value will see your transformation, and they won't even recognize you. You don't need to announce your comeback. Let the results speak for themselves. Let your silence tell the story that words never could. Let your calm presence make them wonder how you survived everything that was meant to destroy you. The truth is, you outgrew the pain. You outgrew the people who doubted you. You outgrew the need to prove anything. You've stepped into a season where your focus is louder than your feelings. And that's where everything changes. That's where you stop chasing and start becoming. That's where you realize the greatest respect is self-respect. So, if you're still in that silent chapter right now, don't lose faith, because that's exactly where your future is being written. Every disciplined morning, every lonely night, every small decision that no one applauds, it's all part of the story that one day will inspire millions. You don't have to scream to be heard. You just have to become so great that your silence echoes louder than their opinions ever could. He didn't beg for respect. He earned it in silence. And now, when he walks into a room, the world feels it. Because the man who outgrew his past doesn't need to look back to prove he's moved on. He's already too far ahead, and maybe, just maybe, that's what life wanted all along. For him to stop explaining and start becoming. Now it's your turn. Let your silence build your legacy. Let your pain become your foundation. And when it's time, step into your greatness quietly. Because the loudest man in the room isn't the one who speaks. It's the one who doesn't need to anymore.